So over the last couple years, a new debate has raged. Is The Exorcist III actually better than The Exorcist? For me, the answer is clearly no, but here's why. Hey, what is up everybody? Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and today I want to talk to you guys about The Exorcist versus The Exorcist III, or Legion if you prefer William Peter Blatty's cut. Now, this is a topic that has really perked up over the last couple years, where people are really going back and revisiting these movies and going, I think Exorcist III might be the superior movie. Now, if you're a big Exorcist III fan, I want to let you in on a little secret.
Me too.
So this isn't going to be a video tearing that movie down at all, actually. It's going to be talking about the merits of each movie and why I prefer The Exorcist. Because at the end of the day, this is all subjective. I cannot tell you that objectively The Exorcist is the better movie. I can just tell you why I think it is. So if you're a big Exorcist III fan and you're afraid that I'm going to dump all over it, I promise you that is not going to happen in this video. So what we first have to look at is, why are people reevaluating this specific movie, The Exorcist III, in recent years? Well, I think it all started in the late 2010s when we finally got William Peter Blatty's Legion cut of the movie. Now, it is not the exact cut that he wanted from the very beginning, but they got as much footage as they could, restored as much of it as possible, and put it together on Blu-ray so people could finally see a closer version of what Blatty was going for. And I think that's when it really started. Though, I would actually say that most people still prefer the theatrical edition of The Exorcist III, and agree that this is an instance where studio interference probably was for the best. But it is funny what a release like that can do for a movie. It can make people really go back and really reevaluate things and think on things, long-held beliefs that they've had for years and years, and question themselves. And I personally will make the argument that that is always a good thing. I don't think we should ever be 10 toes down always with an opinion. I think we should always be willing to be moved one way or the other. As time goes on, we change. Things change around us, so it's totally okay for our opinions to change a little bit. But it's not just that. See, The Exorcist III is a damn good movie. A great movie at that. It is a movie that had no business being as good as it was. I say that because The Heretic is genuinely one of the biggest pieces of garbage I have ever seen in my life. And I think it's just awful. And I don't care what Scorsese says about it. It's just not a good movie. So making another Exorcist film, it's like, oh, really? After that? And then you watch it and you're like, oh, wow, is this good? This isn't supposed to be good. Why is this good? This is William Peter Blatty's story. See, he wrote The Exorcist. He also wrote Legion. Now, Legion was a follow-up to The Exorcist, but not as much as this theatrical film ended up being. Yes, it was a sequel to that film, but more so a spiritual sequel in a lot of ways. It did not rely heavily on the nostalgia and the established rules and universe that that movie had set up. Now, the final product ended up coming out that way, but if you go back and watch Legion, or you read Legion, you'll notice there's a lot of differences, that Blatty was clearly trying to distance himself a lot from that original film. But he's the creator of this universe and of these stories. Another reason why this movie is so good is simply just the cast. Look, George C. Scott is fantastic in this movie. Genuinely fantastic. Jason Miller, it is so great to see him back. I adore him in this movie. I adore him in everything I've seen. Brad Dourif, although his screen time is very limited, he is delightfully evil in this movie, and he is fantastic. The banter between Father Dyer and Kinderman is fantastic. Although it's short-lived, and I wish we would have gotten more, I love every second that those two are on screen together. A lot of these performances are great. They feel lived in. They feel very different from The Exorcist. And I feel like that is something that was absolutely necessary. If you're gonna make a sequel that you want to stand on its own, you gotta do something like that. And Blatty nailed it, and so did every actor in this movie. Another reason why this movie is so good is that it is such an effective mystery thriller. So many things to happen throughout this movie where you're like, okay, well, this can't be the case, right? Oh, well, this might actually be the case. what the hell is going on here? And that is awesome. When a mystery, a thriller can make you feel those things, make you ask those questions, that is crucial to a movie like this working, and it works in spades in The Exorcist III. Another reason that this movie stands out and is so effective is it is a very different kind of horror than The Exorcist. You don't have to be a believer to find a lot of this movie horrifying. This is real life, real world horrors that you or I could experience any day of the week. There could just be a serial killer operating and doing horrible things to people. That is something you could face in your everyday life. That is a primal fear that a lot of us have, and this movie taps into it and taps into it so well. Not to mention, this movie is gorgeous. Look, Blatty knew what he was doing. This guy was delivering with damn near every shot. Beautiful long tracking shots. There is one specific scene, and it's probably one of the most effective jump scares I've ever seen in my life, that is just this stationary shot. It just sits there for well over a minute or two before you actually get the jump scare. It just sits there. It is so suspenseful, and it really leaves you on the edge of your seat because you know something's coming. You know it is, and you don't know when, and you don't know from where, and you don't know what. And I feel like that is so effective. So I think Blatty just did a masterful job with handling the suspense in this movie. One of the biggest things for me, and something that I will give credit to the studio for, is the heavily playing up of it being a sequel to The Exorcist. The inclusion of Jason Miller as Patient X, and really tying those two movies together. That, I understand why Blatty didn't want to do that, but I don't think it was the right decision. I really don't. And I think the fact that they made that something, they mandated that, I think it worked in this film's favor. Because not only does it tie so beautifully to the first movie, it really also does feel like a new thing. It's a new kind of horror from a different angle, a different perspective. I love that about this movie. And I think it sets up a third act that is just truly remarkable and insanely memorable. There is hellish imagery in this third act, and in multiple points throughout this movie. That's another thing that Blatty does really well here. There's a heavy focus on religious iconography in this movie, and the way that it's framed and shot and used in different moments is just really haunting in a lot of ways. But I really do feel like that connection with Karras was vital to this movie working for me. It could have worked as its own thing. It definitely could have, but I don't think it would have had the gravitas or the staying power that this movie has. And I think that is because of it being Father Karras and it being Pazuzu really at the end of the day. Like, this is a demon that's out for revenge. That's honestly a really cool concept. So you just heard me just absolutely laud praise over this movie and talk about why it's so great. So how in the hell could I make the case that The Exorcist is somehow better? Because I think it is. Look, it's important for me to say right here, right now, that you are going to be hard-pressed to find a movie that I would say is better than The Exorcist, at least in the horror realm. I genuinely don't think there is one. Halloween is my favorite horror movie, but I don't think it's the best. I think The Exorcist is. Look, The Exorcist is a haunting film, but it is a drama before it is a horror film. And I would actually make the argument that having an effective drama like that, when you can really nail that, the horror is just amplified. Look at a movie like Hereditary. When you focus on the grief, the family dynamic, the loss, when you really can feel that emanate from the screen and the characters, it makes those horrifying moments that much more horrifying. And The Exorcist does that probably better than any horror film I've ever seen in my life. Not to mention that Linda Blair turns in a performance that you just don't see from child actors. Even today, 50 years later, it's just not something you see. The similarities between the two films are really as follows. They're both really atmospheric. They're both led by incredible performances. They are both horrifying in their own ways. But see, the thing about The Exorcist, I think, that takes it over the top is that dramatic element, is that family dynamic. It is something that is rarely captured in a horror film. Look, I know it's been a debate for years and years whether Friedkin improved upon Blatty's original story or not. And I'm going to make the argument that he did. But I think part of that was also in the casting. Look, Ellen Burstyn is great, absolutely fantastic here as Chris McNeil. I think that Jason Miller as Damian Karras is also fantastic. I already mentioned Linda Blair. And while this movie is focused largely on Chris and Reagan's ordeal and what they are going through, you also have another plot that's happening with that plot, and that is Damian Karras' mother and his faith, and it's just so palpable and so important to understanding this character and to the climax of this movie. And I think Jason Miller really sells that to us. I actually would make the argument that without Jason Miller, The Exorcist is nowhere near as good. That triangle of characters really makes this movie what it is. Furthermore, I think the way that Friedkin directed this movie, while famously unconventional in a lot of ways, and he pushed the envelope to say the least, I think it goes to show in the performances. It goes to show in the way the movie looks. This thing is so damn atmospheric. This thing is so gorgeously shot. Some of my favorite moments in this movie aren't even the ones that you hear about. They're not the ones that you play through in your head. Near the beginning of the movie, there is a scene of Chris McNeil just walking through the streets of Georgetown. And you get overhead shots, and you get shots along the street and the sidewalk where you just got leaves, and we're shooting through branches, and Tubular Bells is playing. And I think that shit is incredible. So from a technical aspect, I could go on and on about why The Exorcist is fantastic. But I would also say The Exorcist III is just as fantastic in the technical aspect. So at the end of the day, like I said, it really boils down to this drama. I also said that there are two different kinds of horror. See, Exorcist III is much more a mystery, a thriller, a crime movie in a lot of ways. The Exorcist was really like the first big demonic possession movie. And you had the rumors of it being cursed, the set was cursed, all these terrible things happening. This just production just brought on a life of its own that went on for decades and decades. And it's really, really sad to know what happened to Linda Blair and everything that she went through because of this. But that goes to show you how much this movie traumatized people. They thought this was real. And that is a mark of a truly great film, a truly monumental movie, one that belongs on the Mount Rushmore. When it can do that to a generation, look at Jaws. Jaws still makes people 50 years later scared of open water. Because of that movie, those movies earn their place. They are up here. They are above S tier. They are untouchable. So you're going to ask me at the end here, what is it about The Exorcist that you feel makes it better than Exorcist III? And I will simply give you two reasons for me personally. One, there is nothing more compelling from a dramatic standpoint in The Exorcist III than what we get in The Exorcist with Chris, Reagan, and Father Karras. There's nothing to that level of drama in that film. That's not a knock on The Exorcist III, because it's not necessarily trying to be that. But that ropes me into The Exorcist. That is what makes The Exorcist a movie that anybody can watch and not even know it's a horror movie. And then as the horror starts unfolding, you are genuinely aghast. Like, you're like, what the hell? As I said, those dramatic elements can take horror movies to a different stratosphere. And this is one of those movies. And I think that's inarguable that this is one of those movies. And I personally just don't believe The Exorcist III has that. Again, I will give it credit. I don't think it's necessarily trying to, but whether it's trying to or not, one movie has it and one movie doesn't. And then my second reason is more of a subjective one. It's my upbringing and my beliefs and the nostalgia that's attached to this movie. See, growing up in the church, you believe in evil. Whether you're religious at all or not, we can all agree that there's evil in this world. Now, however that evil manifests and whatever it comes from, it doesn't matter. There are real world evils. We've all seen them at multiple points throughout our lives. And The Exorcist really takes this quaint little family, this little kid that didn't deserve this at all, because frankly, nobody deserves evil, period, and puts them through the ringer. And you feel for them. But if you are a believer and you grew up in that, and that is just ingrained in your brain, that really resonates with you because you believe that that could happen to you. You believe that that's real. You believe that the threat of that is ever present in your life. And even though now as an adult, there's a lot of things that I learned growing up that I have definitely strayed more from, I still believe in good and evil. I still believe in a lot of that. And The Exorcist III still has that element too, but I think that is The Exorcist. Like, that is The Exorcist. It is a drama, and it is about evil and unsuspecting, unrelenting, undeserved evil. And I cannot put into words how important those two things are when you put them together. Because I think that it's the only demonic possession movie, the only movie like that still to this day that I genuinely find top to bottom a masterpiece. The Exorcist is that. Because as I said near the beginning of this very long video, it is a drama and a family story first. It is a story about a man losing his faith and losing his mother first, before it is a demonic possession movie. The Exorcist is so multi-layered. It is so much deeper than just what you see on the surface. You see the photos, you see a trailer, and you go, oh my God, a little girl's possessed. And then you watch an over 2-hour-long movie and realize this movie is so much more than that. And even just saying that is almost like you're selling this movie short. Because you are. You absolutely are. So as great as The Exorcist III is, it is fantastic. It is easily the second best Exorcist film. It just is. There's never going to be anything that comes close to it. I would love if Mike Flanagan could even come close to The Exorcist III. Even having said all of that, I don't think it can touch the truly impactful, monumental, dramatic, harrowing story that is The Exorcist. There's only 4 spots on Mount Rushmore, and The Exorcist is one of them. And we're not going to build out a new bust to add somebody else. So this isn't to tear down a movie that I have admitted is fantastic. No, it's simply just to reframe the conversation to where it's always been and where it should stay. We're talking about the Godfather here. We're talking about the Granddaddy here. We're talking about a movie that scarred people, that still scars people for generations to come. A movie that was groundbreaking in so many ways. A movie that changed horror. That's The Exorcist. As much as I love The Exorcist III, it does not have those things that it can say. In terms of cultural impact, in terms of just what it did for the genre, what it did for film. I could go on and on and on. I'm very, very passionate about The Exorcist. And I will defend this movie with my dying breath. I will stand right here, right now, and tell you guys, well, I guess I'm sitting, but The Exorcist is the greatest horror movie ever made. Because it's so much more than a horror movie. And that's not to knock horror, guys. Don't worry, I'm not doing what Mia Goth did, even though she didn't really do that, and people just got all worked up over nothing. I'm just saying that this movie is so much more than that. But holy hell, no pun intended, I just rambled. So look, at the end of the day, like I said at the very beginning, this is subjective. I cannot tell you The Exorcist is objectively better. It's about the kind of horror you like. And I don't know, there's just something about The Exorcist that I just spent like 20 minutes saying why I prefer it and why I think it is the superior film. But again, it's like picking between your favorite children. Like, why would I do this? This doesn't feel fair. But a lot of people have talked about this over recent years, and it's really gotten to a point where I'm like, dude, I got to plant my flag here. I can't stand it anymore. I will not stand for it anymore. But I want to hear down below what you think. So go ahead, Mark. Tell me down in the comment section why The Exorcist III is better. Christian, if you watch this, go ahead. Let me know in the comment section. But to all of you truthers out there that know that The Exorcist is the superior movie, sound off. If you don't agree, sound off. I don't care. I want to hear you guys sound off in the comment section because I want to talk to you about it. So I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. Please leave a like on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.